Record.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays with Care Patrol. This is our first Tuesday in April 5th, and we're so pleased to have a guest presenter today who will actually join us again later in the week, or later in the month, rather, to share other topics that I believe to be hopefully of interest to all of us. But in April, we will address issues of financial and legal challenges and opportunities for the aging adult population. And so John Holliman is with us today. John is a fourth generation Alabama lawyer, and he's been practicing elder law for at least a dozen years. This is a distinct brand of law and a somewhat, I think, burgeoning and new area of law that John is, I think, a pioneer in our state. And as such, he has done several things to better aid seniors. One is he's been accredited by the Veterans Administration to do VA pension work, as well as trust work, estate planning, and other things. So John's well-versed in issues around aging and paying for aging care, and that's the topic today. As y'all know, we have certain housekeeping rules. For one thing, we have a survey due at the conclusion of today's presentation. In order for you who are nurses or social workers or another discipline to get your credit for today, we need for you to do an evaluation through SurveyMonkey. I'll be typing that in to the chat room. For those of you on the phone, I will be listing that at the conclusion of today's call, along with the CEU code word or password that is necessary in order to open the evaluation. So you must use the password to open the evaluation, and then you're asked for it again within the evaluation. And then you're asked to evaluate John, the speaker, the topic, the learning environment, so on and so forth. And then my favorite question that we ask of y'all is your ideas for other presentations. And really this month is born of that. I had a lot of people asking about the questions that we'll be posing today and the rest of the month around legal issues. And so it's been great to have that particular comment answered by so many of you. As we continue to let folks in, hello everyone, and thank you for using the chat room to introduce yourselves and ask questions. You're all muted. I think you know that. So if you have a question for John about whatever he may be addressing at the moment, or maybe in a bigger picture question, just put it in the chat room and I'll get it out to him. We can have questions, some maybe during the presentation and again at the end. So if you have a particular question that maybe you want to hold, we'll have time at the end to ask questions as well. This is a 1.0 CEU hour for social workers and 1.2 for nurses. We're accredited by both the nursing board and the social work board to provide CEUs, and this is a live CEU. I know that you have to have, a certain number of those when you renew. So know that this certificate will list it as live, and you can count it as such. But if you miss it, or if you think it was a particularly good session and you'd like a colleague to hear it, these are always recorded and posted on my landing page at carepatrol.com, my landing page at the conclusion of the day. So you can have them watch that and pick out the evaluation or what have you. We're having a few more people come in. We have about 93, and it's about 12:04. So I will step aside other than to potentially ask questions and allow John Holliman to take over. And again, John is going to speak with us today about long-term care and Medicaid crisis planning. And he, believe me, is an expert on it. So let's welcome John, give him our attention, and make him feel like he's part of the community that we're developing here. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, John. Please share with us what you came to share.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Wow, you got a great group. Wow, big group. Sean was one of the first people that I met when I transitioned my practice over to elder law and estate planning from real estate law, and we have kept up, sometimes better than, sometimes more frequent than others, but we've kept up with each other, and found him to be a valuable resource, as y'all do, in the helping seniors community. But he asked me to do this one, and it snowballed into three, which is we decided to break up the topics. So today is long-term care and Medicaid crisis planning, really more emphasis on how to pay for long-term care. So y'all, it's been a while due to COVID since Melanie and I have, my wife and law partner, have been out and about doing presentations, but I think we probably have seen some of y'all before, and y'all have seen me, and Melanie does quite a few presentations. Y'all may know her by being the executive director of the Alabama Family Trust as well. So you may have had some contact with her that way. But we have this office in Pelham and one in Scottsboro, and we have a Chattanooga location. So anyway, we'll jump right into it.
John, let me just interrupt real quickly to make sure you speak into your speakers. Some folks are having a little trouble hearing.
Okay, let's see. How's this? Is this a little bit better?
Yes, it's better.
Yeah, I may be, my face may be bigger than they want to see, but at least they can hear me. So, well, we all, when we start this presentation, we ask you to reflect on the impact of your family. A lot of us have been impacted by, Alzheimer's related dementia and other family dynamics with our aging parents and grandparents. So we ask you to reflect on your own situation to see, and that's the reason a lot of times people refer to us, because they've seen it in their own personal situation. So think about those topics, and if your parents and grandparents have covered this planning, and that kind of makes it hit home.
What?
Yeah.
No. Are you on it? Oh, okay.
Oh, we got somebody that's not muted, but that's okay. If they can jump right in. So I know you have some, we have these initial questions regarding long-term care, and we're going to cover some of these in the other presentations. Well, I want to go ahead and hit on them now. Has the client or your patient or yourselves properly planned for long-term health care? Is the family familiar with their options? If not, here's what we're going to talk about next time. Does the client have the capacity to sign estate planning documents? So you can see the theme there. The earlier, the better that you start this, because if someone does not have the legal competency to sign, we are highly limited on what we can do. And again, we'll talk about that in the very next presentation. Along with, does anyone have legal authority over the client? So, obviously lawyers are not doctors, but lawyers do get to say if a person has the legal mental competency to do a specific thing, meaning do they have testamentary capacity to sign a will? Do they have financial capacity to sign a power of attorney? So that's for next time. So we're in these generations that we call the sandwich generation. So the traditional view is those sandwiched between aging parents and those who need care or help from their own children. And the club sandwich, those in their 50s and 60s, sandwiched between aging parents, adult children, and grandchildren. So we have a lot of healthcare issues out there. So this is highly relevant to pre-planning. So y'all all know these statistics. 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will need long-term care. The average length of stay in a nursing home is 2.5 years. Now think about that one a minute. So you remember the study that MetLife used to do? They used to do a study on aging population. Well, when they quit selling long-term care insurance, they discontinued that study. So we don't have really good up-to-date data on this, but so it's like 2.5 years for men and 2.8 years for women, but that factored in rehab admissions for people that were in for 3 weeks. So those numbers could be skewed because we all know people that have gotten an Alzheimer's related dementia and have been in a nursing home for 5 years or more. Life expectancy of someone diagnosed with Alzheimer's is between 4 and 8 years. And then medical science doesn't know why the diagnoses are increasing, but look at that, anticipated 14 million people will have Alzheimer's by 2050. And presently, Alabama's average nursing home cost is about $100,000 a year. So Medicaid uses $6,800 as the divisor, but you can't hardly find a nursing home that has a retail cost of $6,800 a month. I don't have to tell y'all that. So again, can we pre-plan? Is there a diagnosis, or is it just age-related forgetfulness? Do we have to have the capacity test? Do we need a mini mental? Do we even need one? That's several factors. And again, this next presentation is going to dive deeper into these. Is there a durable power of attorney for finances? Is there a healthcare power of attorney? Is there a guardian or conservator? So again, we're talking about the authority of the person to plan. So again, the earlier, the better. The earlier, the more likely we have capacity, and the options are more. So sometimes people say, well, we don't know where to start, and they end up in our office at our conference table, and they say, we don't know what to do. So we ask them for some information, and we write them a roadmap of the different levels of care, how long their money will last, what happens if they needed a nursing home immediately, what if they need it in 5 years, are they eligible for VA benefits, can they qualify for aid and attendance, is the veteran, does he have a service connected rating that could be increased, what's the family dynamic, is the will likely to be contested? I mean, we just dive right into it with them. So we can provide recommendations. So this is all about the quality of life of the elderly person or the senior. Strategies to correct problem issues and to even correct mistakes in the past. Because what happens is if you call your lawyer in a small town, that does everything, they may tell you to, deed the house to the kids when you get about 70 to protect it from Medicaid. We see that a lot. And sometimes that can work, although it's a little bit of a roll of the dice because there are problems with that. So there are other ways to accomplish protecting assets from being spent down for Medicaid. And it used to be, a long time ago, it used to be illegal to do Medicaid plan. I mean, long before I was an attorney, Congress had some laws and they jokingly called them Granny goes to jail because Granny was trying to preserve assets from being spent down on Medicaid. Then they made it Granny's lawyer goes to jail because Granny didn't really know what she was asking for, but that's not the case anymore. The Supreme Court ruled that since Medicaid is the way we pay for long-term care, nursing homes specifically, in the great US of A, that it's not illegal to try to plan to get the benefits. So just know that it's totally above board to do that. So what are the types of long-term care and how do we pay for it? So y'all, obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, y'all know the levels of care. So, but we have to remind people at our conference table daily. So I'll draw the little stair steps, in-home care, independent assisted living, SCALF, skilled nursing. And of course, we have some really good VA nursing homes. Y'all are probably familiar with the VA nursing homes. I do this, Madison, and go down the state, you know, Pell City, Alex City, and Bay Minette. So we have 4 VA nursing homes, and there's a federally contracted one in Tuscaloosa. So those can also be really good resources. I've had clients in all of them, probably with the exception of Bay Minette, since we're so far away. You know, that's down there near Foley and Gulf Shores. But those can be valuable because of the cost, you know, the $500, $800 a month, but they have to be wartime veterans almost. We'll talk about that on the 3rd presentation. So y'all know the levels of care. So what's the problem with home care? So sometimes the spouse will try to do it themselves and they get physically and emotionally unable to care for the incapacitated person. The family may not be able to help. The children may have full-time jobs. We're all familiar with caregiver burnout. That's a real thing where the caregivers get less healthy than the one they're caring for. Private caregivers, now this, we're probably up to about $21 an hour in Birmingham, but we have offices in North Alabama and the hourly rate's a little bit lower as farther you get out into the rural areas. So, you know, you can find it a little bit cheaper up in rural counties like Jackson County and DeKalb and Marshall, where our other office is, Jackson County. And so then people always ask me this, you know, can we just pay them cash? Well, we got problems with that. Technically, that's illegal because you're not paying taxes on it. There's no payroll tax. And also, if you can't document that, Medicaid classifies it as a gift. You know, you can't give anything away for less than fair market value. And then in-home care can get real expensive real quick. So again, using 24/7 care in Birmingham could be almost $14,000 a month. And then nursing homes really need to update that slide to say $7,000 to $9,000 a month on the nursing home. So, and if you do, I always put it to perspective, give it perspective to clients this way and say, well, if you're just doing 8 hours a day at $20 an hour, you're bumping up against $4,500 a month, but you've left 16 hours a day uncovered. So we may need to think about another option than in-home care. Now, in-home care, obviously you have family members, and then if the assets are great enough, they can pay it and stay at home. Y'all know about independent living. Sometimes independent living works well when you can add on the additional services, and the elderly person, the client feels a lot more freedom in the independent living. They don't feel like, you know, they're so, you know, they're not being so much cared for, and they may be able to still drive, but of course they're not needing a whole lot of care if they can still drive. Then assisted living, you know, y'all know what assisted living is, and you know, so we're recommending these levels of care, and sometimes clients come in with predisposed ideas on what they want their parents to be, and we may have to, you know, tell them that's not feasible. So these are obviously the levels of care. So nursing homes are regulated. They've got a medical director, 24 hours a day. It's long-term custodial care. So y'all know what Medicare pays. You know, after 3 days in the hospital, they'll pay for the stent and rehab. And if you have the right type of policy, you may get 90 days. 100 days. Federal employees may get 4 weeks. So there's a, and then if you have an insurance carrier watching it real close, I had an email yesterday where they only paid for 8 days, and the client had to appeal that. So they didn't get the full 20 or 21 days. So Medicare is not a long-term care plan. It's health insurance that we get by paying into the system all these years with our payroll tax along with Social Security. But it is not a meaningful long-term care plan. So we have to tell people that all the time. So we talked about the VA nursing homes. You do have to be a wartime vet to get in there, although they say that you can get in as a peacetime vet, but usually the waiting list will do you in where you don't actually, it's not realistic to think that a person that served in a peacetime, even though active duty, will be admitted. I have seen it, but it's real rare. So that's a good takeaway. Veterans with service-connected injuries and disabilities, Purple Hearts, they get more priority. And so these were the homes that I did across the state. They're not in the same order, but we have clients in all of them except for Bay Minette. And they're very, those are run by the state of Alabama. They are not run by the feds. The feds provided some money, but they are run by the state. So this controversy that happened a few years ago about waiting list for health care in the VA medical system, the Veterans Health Administration, does not apply to these VA homes. They're nice and clean. They have a lot of staff. So we always triage our people to see if they'll qualify. We've got a gentleman in a nursing home in Jackson County who thought he was going to have to go through the Medicaid process until we triaged it. And he is going into one of these homes, and it's going to save his nest egg from being spent on private pay for a nursing home because of his wartime service. And the waiting list for each one is different. Alex City tends to have the best waiting list because it's arguably more rural. So you generally can get in there 2 to 6 months and then maybe transfer to one closer to your home. That's what we're doing with this gentleman. He would rather be in the Huntsville so people can come by and see him. But we want to get him out of the nursing home at paying $8,000 a month so we can preserve some of his assets. So, but he would not have recognized that himself. As we mentioned, Medicare is very limited. So you may have a lot of questions about long-term care insurance. We're big proponents of long-term care insurance. Melly and I went out and got it to put our money where our mouth is. We don't sell it. We know the best people that do, that will actually, give you options and they're not just selling one product. But if you're under 60 and really under 55, then you retain some leverage to get long-term care insurance. Yes, I'm telling you to spend money on premium, but if you spend a little money on premium and the insurance company pays 3 to 5 years of care, that provides you with a lot of options when you need it. And there are a bunch of different ways to get long-term care insurance now. The traditional argument against long-term care was you pay, let's say, $300 a month, and you pay that all your life. And like y'all, I'm sure we've had clients that are out mowing the grass and they pass away, and they were perfectly healthy, so they never needed any long-term care. So they paid the long-term care insurance for 40 years and never needed it. So they didn't get anything back. You don't use it, you lose it. That's one complaint. Although that's similar to car insurance. If you never have a wreck or never have an accident, you don't use your car insurance, except the state mandates that you have it. And again, we triage these families on, do they have enough money to private pay? So if somebody's got enough money to private pay, then, and that's that's relative, relatively speaking. None of us have a crystal ball sitting here to know how long we're going to be in long-term care or need long-term care. If we did, we could tell everybody exactly what to do on their estate plan and their elder care plan. But we don't have the crystal ball. So what is enough private? Well, if you look at that $100,000 a year, and I know it can be lower than that. Although if you get into Atlanta, it's going to be more than that, for a skilled nursing home. So again, it's relative to geographic location. So 2.5 years would be $250,000, but that's only on the average length of stay of a nursing home. Do people stay in in-home care? Do family members help? Then we go in-home care, so they're there, and then they're going into 2.5 years for the nursing home. So we got to think, it's not just $250,000 per person that covers the average length of stay. And then some people, they want Medicaid to pay for them. People say, well, I paid enough in taxes all my life. Why is it the person that has $2,000 to their name gets Medicaid paid for, and because I worked and have a pension, that I don't get Medicaid to pay for my nursing home? That's a legitimate complaint. And of course, we're going to talk about, we've already talked about the VA nursing homes, but we want to talk about veterans non-service connected disability pension, and we want to talk about VA service connected. So there's not a lot of attorneys that do service connected pension. That is, getting a rating from 10 to actually from 0 to 100%. That's because it's not really similar to elder law. So the aid and attendance, as y'all know, is helps pay for in-home care. So it's similar to elder law. It's something that an elder law attorney would seek out, and a lot of them do. We're about to go for the first time since COVID in person back to Orlando for an annual conference where we get updated on veterans benefits. And then of course, institutional Medicaid. Now, we're not talking about Medicaid for health insurance. We're talking about, Medicaid paying whatever the reimbursement rate. So basically covering the monthly cost of a nursing home. So these are the main ways to pay for long-term health care. So we talked about this. Medicare is generally limited to 100 days. It may pay for days 1 through 20 following a 3-day hospital stay if the patient needs skilled nursing. The copay from day 21 to 100, and that may be covered if you have the right type of Medicare supplemental policy or the right type of Medicare Advantage plan. So, or you may have been a federal employee that has some coverage. And so there's the types of Medigap policies and other Medicare supplement policies that may pay more. But again, the point is here, and the lay people come in thinking that, well, I'll just rely on Medicare to pay for my long-term care. And that doesn't work. We have to tell them. So this actually prevents people from pre-planning this idea that Medicare is gonna pay for it. So Medicare plus is health insurance. We have long-term care insurance benefits. We have private pay from income and savings. So these are the different ways to pay for long-term care. You may have different annuities that have long-term care riders. Sometimes we have to look for those. You have life insurance policies sometimes that have long-term or chronic illness riders that people don't know they've got. So we're constantly looking at how to do that. But again, the sooner people start, and it's the syndrome where your parents don't want to listen to you about adult matters because they raised you as a child. So I call that the conversation. Do your parents have estate planning in place? Do they think Medicare is going to cover their long-term care? Are they one of those that bought a nursing home policy, when they first came out, years ago? Long-term care insurance actually started in the 80s. And so did elder law, but so it's been going back now. It was trickling in, until the 2000s. But, so do they have these things in place? Do they have riders on their long-term care insurance or annuities? So private pay, so this is low. Again, this may be statewide because you see in Alabama, in Birmingham, the assisted livings is getting on up there. So we have some assisted livings. In fact, I've got a relative in an assisted living in a small town, and you're not gonna believe this, it was $2,850 until recently. It just went over $3,000. That's for a room in an assisted living in a small town. So as you all know, we have assisted livings here in Birmingham that are as much as nursing homes. So again, Medicaid uses $6,800 as the divisor, is what they say the average cost. And I'll explain that divisor later. So, but we have several nursing homes that are above $9,000 private pay. So if they have no pre-plan and they have assets, then they're going to be private paying from their income, savings, IRAs, annuities, CDs, bonds, the sale of land, cash value of life insurance. And if they're married, their assets are seen as being owned by them as a unit. So this hits a lot of people by surprise on second and later marriages. I think we have a slide on that coming up, but your wife, your spouse's assets are your assets for Medicaid. A lot of people don't know that. They say, as long as I keep my name on them and my spouse's name off of them, then Medicaid can't touch them, but that's not true. So now this slide is the only one I've got, had one on the VA nursing homes, but we just updated the numbers on this, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks. But so this is not a service connected. This is a benefit strictly to pay for home care. But what VA did in 2018, they said, well, we're gonna change these rules pretty dramatically. And they had actually published it in 2015 for comments. So that means they had been working on it for years prior to 2015. So they passed it and it became effective October 17th, 2018. So we had a huge change. So if you haven't updated yourself, you might be thinking under the old law. So, but these things can really, they can really benefit. So a wartime veteran can get $2,431 a month. That's amazing. So that figure is actually for the married couple. So that I've got a mistake in that sentence. But the surviving spouse, we do this for widows all the time, and that is $1,317. $1,000. That's almost $15,000 a year tax free. So that is huge. I did this for my grandmother. I love telling this story. I've done it for dozens and dozens of widows, but my grandmother was 90 when I transitioned into elder law, and I started talking to her about this benefit. And at that time, the monthly amount was $1,008 because it's indexed for inflation. And I said, Nana, let me get you some of this money for Granddad's wartime service. She goes, well, what do I have to do? I said, well, I need to move a little bit of your money around. She goes, I don't want you touching my money. So she was 89. So at 90, she came back to me and said, what do I need to do? So we got this money for her. Again, it was $1,008. She passed away a couple of years ago, right before COVID, the December before COVID. So that would have been December of 19 at 100 years old. So she got this benefit for 10 years after age 90. So what that benefit did for her, it allowed her to stay, along with her income and the little bit of money she had, it allowed her to stay at home with my mother for 20 years. Of course, she was there 10 years prior to me doing this, but and she only went into a nursing home the last 6 months of her life because she broke multiple bones. So, and this is something nobody really catches it. If a veteran or a spouse is receiving the 13 or the 2,400, then the benefit is reduced to $90 if Medicaid starts paying. Because the theory is they don't want two government agencies paying, so they drop it to 90. Even though the veterans benefit, our clients always remind us, and well, they don't have to, that they earned it. But the VA doesn't exactly recognize it that way. They do say you've earned it, but you got to meet the qualifications, and that's why you get a private attorney talking to you about public benefits, because it's like a maze that we have to weave our way through, negotiate. And while we're on the topic, and I'll talk about this next time, and when we dive deep in there, but the veteran service officers are really good, and these what are they, Patriot Angels and things like that. However, they're located outside the state of Alabama. So, and they're not lawyers. So even if there was one in Alabama. So the elder law attorneys tend to be able to see the bigger picture and, know how to do this as well or better. And we know how to do the appeals on the veterans benefits. The VSOs don't normally do the appeals. So I wanted to make that distinction for you. They provide a great service. Don't get me wrong. It's just a little bit of difference in what we're actually doing. So y'all know about Alabama Medicaid. So we're going to talk about Medicaid, since it is when people come in here, the vast majority of people that come to our office are asking us, how do we get Medicaid to pay for mom and dad, or mom or dad? So we may get that call when they're on day 19 out of 20 days, and one of you guys goes to the family and says, you got to have 24/7 caregivers before we can discharge them, because it has to be safe and adequate before we can let them go for liability purposes. So we may get that call and say, John or Melanie, we can't afford to pay $12,000 to $15,000 a month for very long. So we're initially moving mom and dad home, but we're going to be out of money in so many months. Or we get the benefit of the privilege of telling them, hey, your money's only going to last X number of days. And they say, well, how do we get Medicaid? So then there comes the issues, so we've got a house that was sold for less than tax value because they needed to get rid of it. They paid for, the grandkids' college. They gave away a car. They helped another child that had lost their job. So all these things could be potential disqualifying transfer penalties. So anybody can look up these requirements on Medicaid's website. So you got to be a U.S. citizen or qualified alien. You must live in Alabama and intend to stay here. So there's a thing called forum shopping. That's actually where you choose which court is going to be more favorable, but we can use it by analogy here. So we have some friends that practice near other states. Well, we're actually one of them, although Alabama, we know how to get Alabama approval better than we do Tennessee. But we have some people that, will tell them to go across the border into Florida to get Medicaid because it may be more liberal than Alabama. Of course, that's not practical if you live in central Alabama to move a person that far away. So income, Alabama's an income cap state. So we have people walk in our office all day long. So mom and dad make too much money, they'll never get Medicaid. Well, that's a myth. It is an income, but there's a fix for that. And of course, the old 2,000 asset limit, but there are things that we can do. We'll talk about that. So here's a big one. So let's say that a senior, an elderly person is financially eligible right now. But because of those things that I mentioned a minute ago, by paying for grandchildren's education or helping a child that was out of work, those could be disqualifying transfer penalties. So you never want Medicaid to discover the disqualifying transfer penalties on their own. So we do the 5-year audit for the client. And that way we can catch those and we can possibly mitigate them. We're not hiding anything. There are mitigation techniques for these things. They may even be able to be explained away with a plausible, explanation. Like if a house was sold for less than fair market value or less than tax assessed value, there might have been a really good reason for that. Now they tend to take a hard line on that one, but there's an art and a science to applying for Medicaid. So if you work in the financial office of a nursing home, you certainly have the ability to apply for Medicaid. And it may be you need to do that for practicality, but just keep these in mind that even though we represent the client, the nursing homes benefit greatly from what we do. We don't try to be adverse at all to the nursing home's interest. So actually the client and the nursing home's goals are aligned. And you may not have always seen that with elder law attorneys or people holding themselves out to be elder law attorneys, but that is the case when we process, and it's the supporting documentation is the problem. It's not the Medicaid application itself. So when I say the Medicaid application, it's the 5-year audit, the transfers. That's the actual tough part of the application. Here's one. My parents. So Medicaid should just start paying, and see here's the transfers within the 5 years again. So they could be totally eligible, but Medicaid picks something up on the 5-year audit and give you a number of months or years that Medicaid's not going to pay. So again, if they're financially eligible, that means they don't have the money to pay through that penalty period. So we have to watch that. Here's one of the best examples is family comes in and they have a deed. We go through the audit with them or preliminary audit, and we see that they were about to apply for Medicaid with the nursing home, and the transfer of the house was about 4 years and 6 months. Well, as soon as you snapshot that for Medicaid, the value of that house is caught up in the application when they could have private paid for 6 months and the transfer of the real estate is off the table for Medicaid. So we caught that for them. So they private paid for a certain period of time. And they were able to save the house. This is one I was mentioning. You and your spouse are looked at as a unit, no matter when you got married. And if we have, two 60-year-olds get married that have been married before, and they do a prenuptial agreement, which is wise in most cases. It doesn't ever hurt to do one because you can do anything you want to after a prenuptial is signed. You could own everything jointly, which basically voids the prenuptial, or you could start a business together. So people don't know that a prenuptial only governs in the event of divorce. So a prenuptial agreement actually does nothing for Medicaid. It doesn't, they're not a party to it. All your assets still belong to your spouse if your spouse needs the nursing home. So the only way the prenuptial agreement helps you is if you were to get divorced. And we're not out here recommending people get divorced so that Medicaid would pay for their nursing home. Sometimes people come up with that on their own, but and that comes with a whole other set of problems, but just know that about prenuptial agreements. This one I mentioned, you and your spouse, or whether your name's on it or not, if you're married, they count all the assets of a married couple as belonging to one spouse if that person is applying for Medicaid. So don't think that you can, even your adult children, well, y'all just segregate your assets. It doesn't work that way. So pre-planning catches this sort of thing. Pre-planning for Medicaid. We look at, is there enough to private pay? What levels of care might be next? What's the family dynamic? That sort of thing. So my sister took $40,000 out of mom's account. Mom didn't give it to her, so Medicaid should overlook it and approve her. This will be considered an impermissible gift. Mom will be penalized for the $40,000, a 7-month penalty. Again, $40,000 divided by the divisor. And I have to check that 6,800. It may have just changed, but things change every January 1 by a little bit. But so you say, well, sister took it without permission. So no, mom would literally have to prosecute her own daughter for Medicaid to consider removing that penalty. So here's the child. Mom felt sorry for her son who was out of work for 6 months. She paid part of his living expenses during those 6 months, but he is her son, so that should be okay. No, another impermissible gift. So mom's going to be penalized for the money she gave to son, even though, what parent would not do that for her child, right? So again, we want to catch these things early. And these are the things that can cause problems for the nursing home. So if we catch these things early, it can actually save everybody a lot of time and grief. And I'm not talking about we would not catch this in a pre-plan, because we don't know when somebody's going in. If we've got mom and dad sitting in front of us and they're healthy at 75, we're not looking at a 5-year audit. We're looking at doing their estate plan, maybe using a trust to preserve some assets, to do things to get through the 5 years where assets are not counted, if that's feasible. So these are more crisis type techniques. We would not discover this on a pre-plan because we wouldn't have to, because we've got time to plan. So if the person goes into a nursing home, they use their own income for their long-term care expenses. In other words, it's applied toward the nursing home, and Medicaid pays the difference. Income cannot exceed the monthly limit of $2,523. Although y'all have heard about QITs, so excess income can be corrected, so Medicaid will overlook the excess. Fewer and fewer banks are doing QITs. They don't want to fool with them. So what we're doing is we're running the income through this little checking account, so Medicaid won't say they're over the income limit. So that's the purpose of a QIT. And so here's the asset limit, $2,000 in countable resources. So excluded assets or exempt assets are limited, 1 car, prepaid burial, that kind of thing. So no matter how the property is titled or tied up, it's on the table for Medicaid. So as you can see, pre-planning, even on a crisis plan, is key. We should not just fire off the Medicaid application and let Medicaid sort it out. We should do the sorting ourselves, and that gives people the best chance. And we can even, after we've gone through the audit, we can even tell the nursing home that this looks like this is the case, with the family's permission, we can say that. Now we can pick the date in the future, like if it's May 1st or June 1st that we're going to have eligibility. So it eliminates that gray area of how they're going to qualify. So that is very important on Medicaid applications. And some of the audience may, be in the finance office for nursing homes. I know most of you have RNs and medical type backgrounds, but so this is what we do and what people that do Medicaid applications do. And of course, the legal issues can pop up. It's not just accounting type issues. So y'all know about the monthly needs allowance for the community spouse. Spouse remaining at home is called the community spouse, and the spouse inside the nursing home is called the institutionalized spouse. So the institutionalized spouse can get enough, the community spouse can get enough of the institutionalized spouse income so that they can make $2,177. A lot of people don't know that. So this is, so like our example down there, Mr. Smith receives a pension in Social Security totaling $3,000 a month, but Mrs. Smith, her Social Security is only $800. So once Mr. Smith is out, Mrs. Smith can keep $1,377 plus her $800. So she gets to keep it, so she's not impoverished. So again, we don't a lot of times have the control of when the snapshot is, the date of institutionalization. So sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But that's when they snapshot the couple's assets. But that doesn't mean that we don't have options to explain things away in the 5-year audit. Remember, jointly owned, it doesn't matter. Prenuptial agreement, it doesn't matter. The community spouse IRAs are included. Some states do not do that, but Alabama does. So here's the, if they've got $27,480, the community spouse can keep that. But if they've got another number, you got to divide it by 2, and the community spouse can keep up to $137,400. That's a huge surprise for people with $100,000, because you say, well, if they got several $100,000, why don't they just private pay? Well, they're going to have to for a certain period of time, but they could easily run through all that money. So if in Jackson County, where a lot of times we're protecting farms, that could mean that part of that other half has to be sold to pay for the nursing home. So the family farm, and the kids may live on the farm. So it may mean the IRAs are liquidated. Even the community spouse's IRAs are liquidated and used for the institutionalized spouse, despite the fact that she earned the funds. So this is what I was talking about in the 5-year audit. We catch these before Medicaid sees them. You don't want the Medicaid caseworker to find these themselves. You'd rather be more proactive and say, this is why it happened, and see if there's a way to mitigate that. So as I mentioned, Melanie has been running the Alabama Family Trust since for the last 7 years. And so in addition to practicing here, so that's a tool that everybody, well, most of you out there know about the Alabama Family Trust. It's a tool to protect some of those assets. The institutionalized spouses amount, since they're over 2,000, can be put in there, and Medicaid can be approved immediately. And it can also be used to solve penalty issues. So here it is, placing assets in trust for a spouse in assisted living and applying for Medicaid for the spouse in a skilled nursing facility means the spouse in assisted living can keep more than the normal $137,400. So that's very good. This means the spouse can afford to stay in assisted living longer. Using the monies in the trust for the disabled person's needs means that the spouse or children will not need to pay for these items out of pocket. So you can draw off that account for pajamas, furnishing the room, even a private room, and then the family members don't have to pay for it. So we can preserve that institutionalized spouse's money and use it on them. It's like having your cake and eating it too. Now, Medicaid has an underlying lien on the Alabama Family Trust. Yeah, so that is, so the advantages of planning your estate and long-term care together. So this is the big picture. So people will come in for estate planning and they don't even realize they've got a long-term planning issue or vice versa. So we do estate plans and we look at their long-term health care plans, not their health insurance, but their ability to pay for long-term custodial care. We also take into consideration the family dynamic. You know, several children live on the West Coast and they're not involved in mom and dad's care. How do we bring these together so we don't have a will contest? How do we save specific assets for even specific beneficiaries? So big picture planning is huge. Again, the earlier you start, the more you can save. So just to touch on this, when somebody comes in our office, this is a basic estate plan. Now, the last two, you can choose between a will or a living trust. So that is, but everyone should have these, no matter where you are, who you are. If you're over 18 years old, you can make a will. Although 19 is still the age of an adult in Alabama, one of the last states in the nation. But everybody needs to, so this is not necessarily long-term care planning. This is some disability planning because your power of attorneys are in there. So these are some advanced things we can do. Some asset preservation or protection trust. We don't have to worry about estate taxes right now unless you have more than $24 million as a married couple. That's a huge number. So we do some irrevocable trust that people can put money in real estate in, and they after 5 years they're not counted as assets. So a lot of people come in asking for those. The grantors, the elderly people, cannot be the trustee. So they do have to have good children or good grandchildren that they trust, but it's one of the only ways to do it. So how do you begin a long-term care? So define some specific goals, determine the size of the estate. Don't wait. Indecision is the worst decision. A lot of times we'll meet with people and they just get a warm and fuzzy about the meeting and they'll go on to vapor lock. They think they've made some progress, so they table it. Or there's too many options. I just can't think about that right now. Those are the worst reactions, you know. Consider working with an attorney, whether it be, but you want to go to somebody that, you know, elder law and estate planning are their main focus, day in and day out. You don't want to go to a general practitioner for this. So take time to discuss the solutions to all your estate planning issues, take control and determine your legacy, where your assets going. This planning may result in your heirs having an inheritance, which is not the primary goal. Your quality of life is the primary goal. But I have people that I haven't heard from in 10 years that come to me and say, John, that trust worked. Mom and dad have passed now, and we were able to use this money and we've got X number of dollars left. And it's going exactly the way they want it to go. And that's a great, great feeling. So with that, I think we're right at the time. And Sean, if you want to either open it up or read me any questions, whatever your time allows. think you're still muted, Sean.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm
that's
technologically, not very advanced. I said, John, I think you've done an excellent job. It's a huge topic that you've been able to, distill down for us in manageable bites. One person, Ms. Harris, has asked if a patient's asked for specific insurance companies that offer long-term care, which ones should she recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we actually recommend the advisor that can run the different companies that offer the best at the time. So we first of all, we tell them to ask their own insurance advisor, but sometimes those are captive. In other words, they only sell one or two products. So when shopping for long-term care, you want 4 or 5 different options. So you go to an insurance person that not only does long-term care, but is more of an insurance advisor. And if she wants to contact me off the list, I can give her the name of the advisors that we recommend.
Sure, John. Your information is here on the screen, but if you're on the phone listening to John, you could give him a call at 205-663-0281, or you can look for him online at bradfordholliman.com. And that's Melanie Bradford and John Holliman.
They can also email me directly, john@bradfordholliman.com.
Thank you so much, John. And y'all, please remember, John, if you have clients who have concerns or issues that may be related to elder law or the need for trust or Medicaid planning, please remember John, as you are so kind to remember Care Patrol when people need planning in that regard. So I thank you, John, for your time today. That's all the questions that we have. Y'all can find this presentation online at carepatrol.com under the advisor page for Sean Barnes, which is me. So if you have someone who's missed this, you're welcome to see a recorded version and get a recorded CEU from the Survey Monkey. If you let me know, then please tune into that and then look for John later this week. John, I can't remember the dates that you're on. Do you recall? I think it's maybe the 12th and the 19th.
Yeah, I don't have him in front of me, but I'll be here.
Oh, we've got some. Thanks, John. Thank you. Thanks. Wonderful and much needed presentation.
And tell them, Sean, if they just want to email me questions and use us as a resource, like Ms. Harris's question, we'll be glad to answer those.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to end today's session for all of us. You continue to get very helpful information, comments, John, so that you know. And thank you again so much. And thank all of you for being here. I'll get your certificates out this evening and look for you later next week. I think next Tuesday when we're together again. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.